What's up, awesome YouTubers? Ryan1988 or Justin back here to do a video for you guys, and in this video I'm here to talk about my top 10 favorite horror movie sequels because recently I saw The Conjuring 2, absolutely loved it. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely go check it out in theaters. But that was one of my favorite sequels, or one of the best sequels. For this video, I'm not going to include that movie until I rewatch it again, because for me, the top 10 favorite horror movie sequels that I have here right now, I've rewatched over and over, and there's a reason why they're in this top 10. But definitely check out Conjuring 2 if you haven't seen it yet. Like I said, it is one of the best sequels that I've seen, one of the best horror movie sequels. So I hope you guys enjoy my top 10 favorite horror movie sequels, and these are my opinion. If you don't like a movie, that's fine. Everybody has their opinions on films, but these are movies I absolutely love. Ones that when I rewatch them, I still love them. And if they're not as good as the first movie, they're definitely up there with the first film. But some movies actually beat the first film in my opinion and are better. So starting off this countdown is, I would say, if I'm going to go in order, my number 10, and that is Phantasm II. Phantasm II is a 1988 or 1987 sequel that came out. I believe it's 1988, the year I was born. And the Phantasm II is one of the rare sequels that I actually like better than the first movie. I love the first film. I love part 3. But I love part 2 the most. I think this is the better movie, and it's a lot more entertaining. I think that's probably the thing that outweighs the first film. Is the first movie, with that movie you kind of have to, develop the characters, and it's a little bit slower, which I don't have a problem with. I like slow, built-up movies, and that movie works for that. But I think Phantasm II is a better movie because it is a little bit more fast-paced. There's a lot more action going on. The story's really interesting. It's kind of a road movie, and I love that. And the effects in the movie are great as well. Some of the best effects from, any horror movie in my opinion. And I also find it to be just kind of an underrated sequel as well. If I had to do a top 10 underrated horror movie sequels, I'd say this would be on this list. Yes, they changed the actor who played Michael, but I had no problems with the recasting. I think the actor that they got for Michael in this movie did a great job. I love the character. I believe her name is Liz. I could be wrong, but I love her in the movie, the lead actress. I think adding a lead female character in this movie kind of makes this movie stand out from the other movies. She's great. We have Rocky in the third movie, but in my opinion, out of the two female characters that really stand out in this series, out of the two, I think the character Liz in this movie, I believe her name is Liz, kind of stands out the most. She's kind of developed better when it comes to story. And so I love that character, and I love Reggie, and I love the tall man. I think, Angus Grimm, the late Angus Grimm, he actually, plays the tall man better in this movie than in any of the other films. I think he's creepier in this movie, and he's creepy in the first film, even creepier in the third movie. But he is, such a dark character in this movie, and I just feel like he kind of portrayed the tall man the best in this film. So, Phantasm II, absolutely love it. If you have not seen it yet, definitely check it out. The next one is probably one that, will not be on a lot of people's top 10 lists, but it's a modern horror movie sequel that came out, I believe, in 2011 or 2012, and it is Paranormal Activity III, and I have this triple pack here with the first 3 movies. And again, like Phantasm II, the third one is my favorite one in the series. I think it has the better scares. I think it has the better story. I like the fact that this movie kind of went back in time, and it's a prequel and a sequel. This one takes place in the 80s, and I love a lot of the 80s references in this movie. There was a Teddy Ruxpin, and I had one of those that's in this movie. Briefly, you see him. I like the camera. I like the fact that you have VHS tapes and you have to record on a VHS tape. Those little elements I love because I love the 80s. And like I said, I think that the scares in this movie are much better, and it's a creepier film overall. And for me, the first 3 movies are where the series is the strongest. I think Part 4 is a pretty good movie, and I've grown to like that one. Mark 1's I'm not a fan of, and I actually was surprised with Ghost Dimension. Is it as good as the first 3? Definitely not, but I think it's a fun movie, and it kept my interest. But the 3rd movie, in my opinion, the best one, and I absolutely love that. So yeah, I had to put Paranormal Activity 3 in it. It might be bumped off my top 10 list in the future, I'm not sure. But, you know, The Conjuring 2 was amazing. However, like I said in the beginning of this, I didn't want to add that movie on my list until I rewatch it again. Because while I loved it, it's, for me, I think you have to watch a movie more before you add it to a top 10 list, in my opinion, or top 5. The next movie is not as good as the first film, but it's one that I've rewatched several times. I saw it in theaters, and while a lot of people hated this movie, I absolutely loved it, and it was Texas Chainsaw or Texas Chainsaw 3D. This is my favorite sequel out of all the sequels. I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning. I really enjoyed the remake a lot. I love Part 2. But for me, if I were to pick a favorite sequel after the first film, it'd be Texas Chainsaw 3D. I don't think this movie is the bad movie that a lot of people make it out to be. Yes, there's some cheesy one-liners in this movie, but if you're going to make that a huge negative, then we got a problem there because it's a line in a movie. Every movie, for most part, has a terrible one-liner or something, but it shouldn't be a huge negative, and I've heard a lot of people say that that was one of the biggest problems because there's a line that the lead actress says in this movie, "Do your thing, cuz," that really throws people off for some reason. It doesn't throw me off that much. I love the fact that this movie was a sequel after the first film. Right when this movie opens, you see a brief montage of the happenings that took place with the first film, and it's great. And I remember seeing this movie for the first time and being really excited for when I saw that. I absolutely loved it. And it opens up in 1974 with the original house, which looks exactly like that first movie's house in the first film. And it opens up with the Sawyer family. So that was awesome. Loved it. Or, you know, Leatherface's family. Loved that. I know another big complaint people have with this movie is the fact that, you know, the timeline is off. And for me, I didn't find that to be a big problem because I've seen this movie several times and I don't see any reference where the movie says 1974 in it. Yes, we know the movie, the original, came out in 1974, but it's never mentioned in the film. There's no newspaper article that says 1974. So when people talk about the timeline and how, you know, it just doesn't fit well, you know, yes, we know that movie came out in the 70s, the original, but I don't really worry about the timeline. I want to be entertained by a movie. I want a story to grab me, and the story grabbed me with this. I had a lot of fun with this movie. It also has great tension that I really enjoy. So overall, I love Texas Chainsaw 3D, and in my opinion, it's not the terrible movie that people make it out to be. So Texas Chainsaw 3D, absolutely love it. The next one is definitely one of the best sequels in my opinion, and that is Scream 2, and I have this triple pack right here. But Scream 2, what I love about this is that it pokes fun and it talks about horror movie sequels, and I love that. And with every movie in the Scream franchise, they talk about a certain thing or certain element that every horror movie franchise has. The first film was just slasher movies or horror movies. The second one was sequels. The third one was trilogy. And the fourth film talked about remakes. But Scream 2 has great tension like the first one did. It has great returning characters while also adding great new characters. And the revealing of the killers overall was a great reveal when I first saw this movie, because there was one character in this movie, and if you haven't seen it, I'm not really going to talk about the character, that I was totally surprised with. There's another character when I look back on the movie that I'm like, yes, he plays the whole, he looks like a crazy psycho, but with the Scream franchise, you don't know who the killers are. So for me, what I love about the Scream franchise is the fact that you don't really know who these killers are. You guess that it's that person or that person, but it kind of throws you off, and I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. It throws you off at the end when the killers are revealed. But I love Scream 2. It holds up really nice with the first one. The opening in the theater is one of my favorite openings in a movie or in a horror movie period. And I love Scream 2. Great writing. I love Kevin Williamson. What I think really stands out with Scream 1 and 2 compared to the other 3 and 4, those films, I think what stands out with the first two movies is the writing. That's where I was going with this. The writing's just great. So, but yeah, Scream 2, absolutely love it. A lot of people have seen it. In my opinion, it's one of the best sequels. The next one is Dawn of the Dead. I love Dawn of the Dead. This sequel came out 10 years after the first film. And if you have not seen the first movie, or say you watched Dawn of the Dead before you saw the first film, which was Night of the Living Dead, you really did not have to see that first movie to enjoy this movie or understand it. Because every movie in George Romero's Dead series, they all have different characters, different plots, and you don't really have to see the previous film if you don't want to see the newest movie. And that's the case with Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, two of the best sequels that really kind of are just great movies, great sequels and great horror movies. But Dawn of the Dead is the best sequel in my opinion. My favorite one is the original Night of the Living Dead, but when I go to one of the sequels, I go to Dawn of the Dead more. I think it has great character development. You really, for most part, overall, love the four main characters. And they are the main focus of this film. They're in this movie for, it's almost, I believe, like 2.5 hours long, in this mall, stuck there, and they're building a life there. Because the outside world is plagued with zombies. So yeah, I love Dawn of the Dead, and a lot of people have seen this, so I really don't need to talk about it too much. But it's definitely one of my favorite zombie films, one of my favorite horror movies, and it is my favorite sequel after the first movie. The next one is in a box set, and it is the Friday the 13th set, which I love this set. And what I love about this series is, for most part, I love every movie, or mostly every movie. I love a majority of these films. Some not as good as others, and there's maybe one or two that are terrible. But for most part, I love a lot of the movies in this franchise, and when I go and try to, pick which is my favorite sequel, I go back and forth. But I think my favorite sequel at the moment is Part 6, Jason Lives. I love Jason Lives. It screams 80s. A lot of these movies took place in the 80s, but this one really screams it with, the look of the movie, the clothing, the music, and, this is the best that, in my opinion, or one of the best looks for Jason. I think the Part 7 look is slightly better, but I love the rotten Jason that we later got in the movies. I love that. I love the characters in this movie, especially our two leads, one of them being Tom Matthews, who plays Tommy Jarvis, who is in the first two movies. He plays him in this movie, and I love his version of Tommy. I love our lead actress. I can't think of the character's name right now, but I love her. And a lot of these characters in this movie are very likable. There's never one character in this movie, besides maybe one of the cops, where I'm like, I hate that character, let that character die. for most part, a lot of these characters, especially the camp counselors, are very likable people. So when you see them die, it's actually kind of sad in my opinion. And this was also the first Friday the 13th film where there was kids at a camp, and they weren't safe at all either. You know, none of them died, but they were in some ways terrorized by Jason. The little girl in this movie comes face to face with him at one point, and it's creepy. It's still creepy. So I love Friday the 13th Part 6. It's a great movie in my opinion. I'll say awesome movie. And right now my favorite sequel of the franchise. So I don't think it's as good as the first one. I have a special place in my heart for the first movie, and that's my favorite. But if I had to pick my favorite Jason film, right now it's Part 6. So Jason Lives. The next one is The Evil Dead 2. Now, I love the first movie slightly more, but Evil Dead 2 really stands out for, you know, a lot of other reasons. One of the reasons that it stands out and is, you know, works is the comedy elements in this, the dark humor. There's some slight scares in this movie, but I think that this was the first film in the franchise where a lot of dark humor was brought into the movie. Where the first film, yes, there were laughable moments, especially when you go back and rewatch it, but that first Evil Dead movie is it's a creepy film overall in my opinion. But Evil Dead 2 is a lot of fun. The effects are amazing. For 1980s effects, they are awesome, and still some of the best effects I've seen in a horror movie. I love the alive deer head that's hanging on the wall that's screaming. I love the fact that we got to see the first time where we got to see a demonic Ash. I love that. And the characters are a lot of fun as well. So Evil Dead 2, in my opinion, is definitely one of my favorite horror movies, but one of my favorite sequels. So Evil Dead 2, absolutely love it. I'm going to quickly go through these last three. Insidious Chapter 3 is my favorite of the franchise. And I rewatched Part 1 recently, last week, when I was going and getting prepared to go see The Conjuring 2. And while I love the first Insidious movie, I prefer Insidious Chapter 3. It's a prequel slash a sequel. You know, more of a prequel, but it's called Chapter 3, so you could say it's a sequel too. But if I had to say which one I prefer of the trilogy, definitely Insidious Chapter 3. It's one of the rare times where a sequel is better than the first film, in my opinion. And Insidious Chapter 3 is a scary film. It's a very creepy film, great tension, great characters. This was the first time where we got to see Lin Shaye's character really have a huge development. She was, you know, some of the best moments in the first film and the second movie, and I love her in those movies. But she really stands out in this movie and gives a great performance, in my opinion. You know, I like our lead actress. She's really likable. You never want anything to really happen to her. And when the bad things happen to her, it's sad and it's terrifying. She goes through a lot with this movie. And there's a lot of great tension throughout this film. So Insidious Chapter 3, absolutely love it. And like I said, it's one of the rare times where I think this film is better than the first movie. So, loved it. And this was directed by Lee, I can't pronounce his last name, but Lee Wallman? Probably saying it wrong. But Lee wrote the first two films, wrote this movie, and he's writing Chapter 4. But the first two films were directed by James Wan, and while I love James Wan's directing and his style of filmmaking, Lee brought his own style of filmmaking into this movie, and it was great, and it really worked. So, some of the best writing in the franchise and the best directed movie. So, Insidious Chapter 3. The next movie is my favorite film in the franchise, and I'm going to review this franchise soon, but this is my favorite one in the franchise, and I have the box set here, but it is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I've always really enjoyed New Nightmare, and I've, over the years, loved the movie. But it took me, you know, some watches to say that this is my favorite of the franchise. As far as, you know, writing, in my opinion, it's the best writing. The first film is amazing. It is one of my favorite horror movies. I absolutely love it. But New Nightmare's writing is so strong. I think Heather Langenkamp, who plays Heather in this movie, herself gives the best performance out of the Nightmare films that she's been in. I think this is, this brought back Freddy being scary, where that franchise really kind of made him funny as the series went along. The New Nightmare made him scary again, and that's one of the things that Wes wanted to bring to the movie, was to make him terrifying like he was in the first movie and even in the second movie. So Robert Englund gave a strong performance as Freddy, very creepy. Mika Hughes as Dylan, a great child actor who was great in Pet Sematary and also great in this movie. Loved him in this. If I had to say what my slight flaw with this movie would be, is the look of Freddy in the film. I think as far as looks, Freddy looks the best in the first movie. He's creepy in that movie, really creepy. But, Robert Englund brings some creepy, scary moments in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And as far as the movie as a whole, this is my favorite of the franchise. I absolutely loved Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have seen it, but I absolutely loved it. Just awesome. And I like the twist that, we're now in the real world, and Freddy, even though he's a fictional character in a movie, he's still terrorizing people and terrorizing the stars of the first film in real life. So I love that. My last one, I'm going to briefly talk about it, is Halloween 2. For the longest time, I actually went back and forth if I loved this one more or Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And while that's my third favorite film in the Halloween franchise, Halloween 2 is the best sequel. If you want to consider this, you can say that, the first Halloween and Halloween 2 are just one big movie. Because Halloween 2 picks up right after the first film, and it works really well. I love the fact that this movie takes place in a hospital, where a place like that is supposed to be safe, but in this movie, it's one of the worst places to be. I love the fact that a lot of the movie is dark. The hospital is, the lights are out for most part in the hospital, and that's really creepy. That gave a really good creepy element to it. I love the fact that we have Jamie Lee Curtis returning back to the franchise after Halloween, and this was her last horror movie in over 2 decades until she came back, or almost 2 decades until she came back for Halloween H2O. This was supposedly her last horror movie, and she didn't do one for a very long time. And she did a great job in this movie. Yes, she doesn't have a lot of lines, but she does a great job acting-wise. I love Dick Warlock as Michael Myers. He did a great job portraying the character, and he was creepy in the film. What I've always loved about Michael Myers is the fact that he doesn't run, he walks, and it's just creepy. In this movie especially, he's walking around the hospital, and for a long time, he doesn't catch up with Laurie. And then eventually, he finds her, and it's terrifying. So that whole chase scene between him and Laurie is creepy. So, and I say creepy a lot, but this movie is a scary film in my opinion. I like her characters in this movie. There's really no character besides maybe, and I get his name wrong all the time, Bud. Besides Bud, there's really no character that you hate in this movie, and you really don't even hate Bud. He's just kind of a sleazy guy. Hits on women. He hits on them. Yeah. Overall, I love Halloween 2. I think it's a great movie. And when I say he hits on women, I kind of want to talk about that. He just kind of, makes his move on them. So, not actually hits them. If you haven't seen the movie, I wanted to just mention that. But for most part, I think a lot of people have seen Halloween 2. But yeah, I'm not going to drag on and talk about this one too much, but I love Halloween 2. A scary sequel, one of the best horror movie sequels, and my favorite horror movie sequel. So I'm a big fan of the Halloween franchise, and Halloween 2 has always been one of the ones in the series that terrified me. You know, there's elements of, well, the first film's scary. The first movie is a scary movie in my opinion. But there's scary moments in this movie that work over the first movie. So, I don't know. I love Halloween 2. Just an awesome film. But anyway, guys, that is my top 10 favorite horror movie sequels. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for my rambling. I always do that in my videos, and I don't edit this stuff. So, but anyway, guys, like I said, I hope you enjoyed my top 10 favorite horror movie sequels. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will be back with my next video in the future. And I'm going to start reviewing the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise soon, because I want to kind of go back and revisit some of my favorite horror movie franchises and review each and every one of those movies for you. So the first one up is going to be the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So anyway, guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon. And as always, you guys are awesome, you guys rock, and with the positive out with the negative, and go eat some Skittles. Alright guys, bye.